when a mom goes to Google a problem like cyberbullying, they get several million, 100 million answers. Like, how are they supposed to, how are we moms supposed to navigate that?
Yeah.
I was hoping that
Really excited to be joined by my guest this week, Melody Bergman, founder of Media Savvy Mamas. You're not seeing her on the screen right now because something went wrong as we were recording and it just cut off the introduction. So we're going to jump to the actual interview in just a minute. But if you want to check out more of Melody's work, then the links are in the description of this video. Media Savvy Mamas, she's been involved in a lot of projects for the last number of years. We connected through the Safeguard Alliance, which is a group of organizations that all in some way are working to help the prevention side in terms of helping children and families navigate these issues, and in particular to protect children from being exposed to pornography. And so we've been able to work on a number of different projects together, and we're involved in some focus groups at the latest Coalition to End Sexual Exploitation Summit in Washington, D.C. earlier this year. And so I'm super delighted that Melody was able to join us for this interview, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. To explain where this interview kind of jumps in, it was right after I'd asked her kind of why she started Media Savvy Mamas and what the motivation was behind that. And so that's the answer that she's giving right now.
when a mom goes to Google a problem like cyberbullying, they get several million, 100 million answers. Like, how are they supposed to, how are we moms supposed to navigate that?
Yeah.
I was hoping that Media Savvy Mamas would be a gathering place. I started out with launching the forum so that moms could not just like access articles or access a search, but access real people, access moms who are going through those problems, access me, access some sort of a staff, some sort of a problem solving like think tank, so that we can actually talk to each other about these problems. Because I think that there's great power in people talking to people. I think we're in kind of this mode now of the search engine generation.
Yeah.
Ask Google. Google will tell me.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, I saw it was an interview with Elon Musk, and he was actually explaining like the limitations of robots, right, and artificial intelligence. And he's saying like there's nuances to what the human brain can do and think in certain ways that is almost impossible to program. And his best example was, he said, like, you think about the things that robots can do in a factory, and they can do like anything that anybody else can do, and better and faster and stronger. He's like, but training a robot to grab a hose is impossible. Right, like the way that a hose moves when it's being brought over somewhere, and it's moving in so many different ways, being affected by so many different factors, and the human brain can account for all of that, and it is no difficulty for you or I to grab a hose.
Interesting.
We know exactly how to do it, and he's like, it's almost impossible to get a robot to do that. And there's things that we can do, right, like nuances to the way that the human brain can work, that again, like Google just can't.
Problem solving. And I think that in this generation where we're trying to solve really complicated problems, like pornography is a really complicated problem. Our children coming across pornography online is not a cut and dry kind of problem. And we need problem solving skills in a human kind of format to be able to solve these problems. And that's where Media Savvy Mamas came from. Actually, it was a very specific aha moment that where it was born. I've been in this movement for a while. I've been researching and going to conferences, and I've been to the United Nations, and I've worked for the Coalition to End Sexual Exploitation and all these great things. And so you would think that me as a mom, when I come on these problems, I would have at my fingertips, I will go to your article number 346 to solve my problem. But excuse me. a couple of years ago, well, I guess it wasn't even right before I launched Media Savvy Mamas, I had a problem with my own son. And I found myself in that moment devastated, lonely, and overwhelmed. And you would think that I had so many resources at my fingertips that I'd be able to solve this problem. But actually, the opposite thing happened. I felt like a total failure. I felt like, okay, I'm supposed to be able to teach other people how to solve this problem. So what's wrong with me? Like, why am I still having a problem with pornography in my own home? So it was almost multiplied more. I had this shame, mama shame, right? I feel like in that moment, what am I going to do? And in that moment, I didn't turn to an article. I didn't want to go read reviews on internet filters. I didn't want to go to a how-to article. I didn't, as much as I revere and love and have so much praise for all of our allies and all the hard work that we do, and there's a place for it. In that moment of panic and despair as a mother, what I really wanted was to go talk to a friend. And I wanted to know if everything was going to be okay. I wanted to know I was going to be able to get out of this. And I wanted to know that my son was going to be all right. And that human connection, we're not going to find in an article. We're not going to find, there is that place that we just need a human connection. And I didn't have that space. So I launched it. I went and tried to launch a forum where hopefully moms will come and we'll be that for each other. Now, in that moment, I went to Facebook. That's the only place I could think of. I went and I posted something about, hey, does anybody have any recommendations for filters? Just because I wanted to start some sort of a conversation. And out of that conversation, moms reached out back to me. Hey, this is what I do in my house. And I thought, it'd be really great if there was a space that was already present where we had conversations like this that were ongoing, that we didn't have to start from scratch on a Facebook thread on my wall every time somebody has a problem, right? So that's really where Media Savvy Mom was born from, was that panic moment that I had as a mom. And as I started to talk to moms and I started to, excuse me, reach out to people, I learned about, I share the story of the well. I like the analogy of the well. And anthropologists tell us that there is an inborn need for women to gather at the well. Have you heard about this analogy?
I haven't.
In antiquity, in like the original man, the men went to hunt and the women went to the well. That's just the way things were. And they were both necessary to the survival of the community. The men went to hunt because they needed to eat. And the women went to the well, not just to draw water, but because they socialized there. And the survival of the community really thrived around this well because they didn't just draw water. That drawing well water takes a long time. And I don't think people realize that, but the wells are deep, and they talk about, like, in the Middle East, in biblical times, they talk about the women at the well, and that it's an all day affair. And so while they're drawing water from the well, they are talking about preparing meals and their children and discipline and problem solving, and they're talking and they're socializing together and solving problems of society. And so there's this innate need that we have hardwired into ourselves. This is what anthropologists say and psychologists say, that is derived from this ancient hunter-gatherer community, that the men like to go out and have boys' night, right? The hunters, they go out and they do their man thing, and the women have this innate built-in need to go gather and be at the well and solve problems together. And we see evidence of this with the young moms. They have play groups, right? And any mom who's been to playgroup knows it's not just about getting the kids together to play, right? There's a lot more that happens there. They talk about, oh, what are you doing about potty training? Oh, what kind of stroller do you have? Oh, what, I had this blowout this morning and we had, to change everybody's clothes and it was crazy. And then, and they talk about their marriage and they talk about, right? There's so much that happens at playgroup. It becomes a social structure for the moms who are there. And then as the kids age out of playgroup, what happens to the moms? Where do they go? Where do they gather? I think that as a society, personally, my kids have aged out of this place where we have the playgroup to go, and the moms are so isolated from each other. We really have to make an effort to find a gathering place, to take time to even go to lunch together or do other things, because we don't have that well anymore. And as we've gotten into this society where our problems are changing, they're largely digital, right? As a society, we're becoming more digitally based, and our problems with our kids are becoming more digital too. So instead of diapering and feeding and strollers, we're dealing with trading nudes, which actually, did you know that's the new term for sexting? Did you know that only old people say sexting?
Yeah. Which is, I'm okay with, because sexting always sounded like a word that someone older came up with to try to speak to the youths.
Yeah.
It's all digital. I think what's interesting in what you're saying is that your website, Media Savvy Mamas, says a gathering place for moms to discuss digital parenting. But what you're describing is how it's not just the digital issues affecting the kids, but how this kind of digital world of communication has really messed with the mom support system. It's created not just problems to deal with, but then it's created a massive problem in and of itself of ruining the societal systems we had to help each other.
Right. Exactly. And then we try to fix it with a search engine, which doesn't have the problem-solving smarts of a human being.
And has no empathy.
Right. It goes back to the same problem of not being able to grab a hose, right? Google's not smart enough to put an arm around us and say, there, it's going to be okay. You're not a total failure, okay? Right? I mean, maybe if you, in the middle of the 60 bajillion articles, might be able to find the right article that has some compassion and sympathy from the author.
Yeah.
From a mom who wrote it. I mean, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of content we're trying to create. Content from moms. Storytelling is a huge part of what we do at Media Savvy Mamas that we're trying to do. Gathering real stories, being vulnerable with each other. I like to use the term the smart people, stupid people model. You know how when we are trying to talk about these things, we tend to gravitate to the experts, right? We want a smart person to tell us what to do next. But we don't have to always go to the smart people. Moms are smart. We know our kids. And the thing is that with all things parenting, it's not always a cookie cutter answer. I mean, I have 2 boys, and they are so different from each other. So guess what? One resource may work for one, and another resource may work for the other one. And even one kid in the same family may be different from another kid in the same family, much less different families with different family systems. We know that even with like diapering and potty training, right? You can't use one end all be all potty training book that's going to work for every single kid on the planet. Why do we think it's the same with pornography? So with all of these, we're going to have to, be adaptable and custom fit our problems and to our solutions. And I think that so there's going to need to be that human touch. And moms are smart. Moms can relate to their own families and their own kids and talk to each other peer to peer. We don't always have to go to an expert. We can talk to each other and say, hey, I did this and it worked really great for me. Maybe moms need each other to talk to and instead of always going to the experts. Does that make sense?
Oh, massively. I think you're right on there in terms of everything we're used to being able to go online and just find the perfect solution, right? Like you want whatever it is, you want a water filter for your home, and you go onto Amazon or whatever, and you can look at all the reviews, and the one with the 5 stars is going to be the best water filter, right? Whatever it is. You check up I bumped into someone at a coffee shop the other day, and he goes, oh yeah, I just saw this place. I looked for the one with the highest ratings on Google, and this was it. And so that's how he picks his coffee shop. And the thing is, he wasn't wrong. It's the best coffee shop in the neighborhood. And that's why it has a 4.7 rating. And everything is so simple. And then, right, like something happens, you have an issue that's as complex as your child being exposed to pornography and all the different things going on with them. And as much as there's fantastic resources out there, like you said, not every kid is going to react the same way because it's so complex. What are they dealing with? Why did they go look at it, or who showed it? It's so complex and different for each kid. And yet we wish that it was just like, okay, can I go on Amazon and what's the highest rated book? And that must be the right one. And all my problems are solved.
Right.
And it's
right.
Not true.
The cool thing is though, that, well, you and I both, we've been in this movement for a while. So we're aware of a lot of the different resources. And I think the cool thing is because we're so aware of all the resources out there, we have the opportunity to create kind of a palette for the parents out there and then give them the paintbrush and say, okay, well, what would you like? Here is the menu. You can pick anything from column A and anything from column, C. And here's what we have. We have a book, a podcast, 5 books on this topic, 3 books on that topic, 20 articles, 5 videos. We have faith-based, we have not faith-based, we have, right? And so in a way, we can act as ambassadors for those who have been working so hard to create curriculum and books and articles and videos. So they don't have to be in competition with each other, and we don't have to worry about ratings. And maybe something just barely came out 2 weeks ago, and so it doesn't have a chance to be rated on Amazon yet, but we know it is going to be a great fit for our friend who talked to us at church last week, right? So,
and I think we also can be, like you said, I love the picture of ambassadors in terms of just the example that you can talk to your kids. And when a parent will come to me, and basically my number one go-to resource is normally going to be good pictures, bad pictures.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I've ever had someone read it and not have a positive review, but there's parents who still are uncomfortable. Like, I don't know how to read this to my kid. And I'm like, well, why don't you just read it? Like, you can just read it for yourself. Yes, it's a children's book, but read it for yourself. And you're just going to have that confidence that I can say that word to my child. We can actually have a conversation. Like I always say with Strength to Fight, like the main thing that we do for the fight against pornography is that we give people permission to say the word pornography. Just by existing, by having these forums, by having these resources, pointing people to them, we're just telling parents, like, it's okay to have the conversation.
There's never a problem with educating ourselves just for the sake of being educated and to be prepared to answer a question when it's asked. And also just being able to admit that there is a problem or an issue. And I also think, and I love to tell parents, don't be afraid to tell your kids, I don't know, let's figure it out. Or I'll get back to you, I'll find out. I think that especially now that we're so digital, we think we have to react or answer or immediately. There's this immediate gratification that comes with our push button digital society, and it carries into our parenting. We think right now, we need to have the answer right now, but it's okay to take time. It's okay to tell our child, I don't know, let's figure it out. Let's work together, or I'll get back to you when I know. So,
and like you were saying, like parents know their kids. And so I think that's super important, right, what you're talking about, just empowering moms, especially, that they don't have to parent like somebody else. I always try to tell parents when they're nervous about these conversations, I'm like, just remember you're the only person in the entire world that will love your kid just because they're your kid. Like nobody else, not even a future spouse will love them in that way. And so you're the best person to talk to them. No resource, anything, like just, you can do it. You know them. And I mean, in today's world, and like, I don't know how you handle this in terms of the Instagram parenting, right? Like everybody's putting out this image of just how great their family life is. And I always laugh because it's like, I'll look at a photo and it's some friends of ours, it's some like a water park or Disney or whatever it is. And everyone's all super happy and having a great time. And then I'm like, the second after that photo was taken, like the one kid pooped his pants and the other kid dropped their ice cream cone. And the parents are like, why did we ever come to this place? Right? But like we have this real added pressure in the social media age that everybody else just looks like they're doing such a great job.
Absolutely. Actually, we had an Instagram vulnerability moment last night, and I I am all about being real, and I teach my kids about it too. We are all about pulling back the curtain on the magic tricks, because that is what pornography is about. That is what media literacy is about, and I love. Educate and Empower Kids has great resources on this. And we have been reading Petra's Power to See. Have you seen that book?
I haven't seen that one yet.
It's about a little girl who goes on a train ride through the city with her dad, and they talk about deconstructing ads. They talk about Photoshop, and they talk about all sorts of stuff, and they talk about pornography, and they talk about her power to see is the ability to pull back the curtain of all of this, just like you're talking about the fakeness around us. And it has been a great resource for my kids. They they love to say, that is so Photoshop. When we see billboards or we see magazine pictures or even on TV, they can tell. They're like, that is so not her face. She has no pores. Mm-hmm. She has, right? It's really.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. And but I haven't seen it by the time we post this video. I promise you, I will have looked at that because it's super important. I used to work in advertising, right? Mm-hmm. And so I always just laugh. I always tell people that like whatever you're being told you need means you don't, because otherwise they wouldn't have to tell you need it. Like, if your car breaks down, you go and you get another car. No one has to run an ad that says you need another car. They only have to tell you that you need it because you don't. And that's fantastic, right? To be able to have those conversations with their kids. And I think also I don't know, maybe I wonder what your thoughts on this in terms of like, how come we have such low expectations of kids in terms of what the conversations are that they can handle? Like,
yeah, they're so brilliant.
I had an incident the other day where my daughter was upset that we had promised her something and we forgot to give it to her, and it was bedtime and she's flipping out, and I'm trying to reason with her and like, you don't need it, or we'll have it tomorrow, and I'm just trying to like stop the waterfalls, and it was it was really interesting because then finally I just said to her, like, people get disappointed. I've been disappointed before. I wanted something and I didn't get it either. And like, she stopped and she said, what happened? Tell me what you didn't get. And like, she's tiny. And I sat down and I told her a story about when I really, really wanted something. I told her a pretty big story from my life and how just the whole story of what happened. And she went, okay. And like, was totally fine. And we just had a conversation that was so much beyond what I was trying to do, and just being like, okay, you're being unreasonable. Why are kids so silly? Like, just stop crying about nothing. It was a popsicle, whatever, I think, or something like that, right? And I'm just like, come on, right? Like, stop crying about the popsicle. And instead, like, we actually had this really interesting conversation, and she was able to understand a complex situation that I was in. And afterwards, I told my wife, like, I have to remember that. I have to remember that she's far more capable to have a nuanced discussion than I think.
I love that. I love that. That conversation has so many levels, because, like we're talking about, the power of storytelling is so strong with problem solving, right? And we are born with this innate need to tell each other stories, to solve problems. That's part of the reason it worked, because the moment you stop to tell her a story, she listened, and she'll remember, right? I think that you're right, that our kids have the capacity to understand and to listen, and that when we take the time to stop and be present with them, instead of flippantly just trying to dismiss their emotions, that's very powerful. Good job, Dad.
Oh, it was one of the, I don't know. It was one of those, like, well, I had an entire day of not great parenting, and I ended on a good note.
No, that's great.
I think that's important. And again, what you said about the empathy that parents can show one another is right. Like, if I write an article about how to deal with a certain issue and having these conversations, it's hard for it not to come across, no matter if I say in the article, like, I'm not always a great parent. Here's some ways that I messed up. But a parent who's struggling in a situation with their kid reads it, and it's really easy to go, oh, I wish I was as good a parent as Josh. Right. But when I'm able to sit down with someone and tell the story, there's so much more human. So when it's just, even if it's through text or a forum or something, when it's that more direct communication, I think people see the vulnerability a lot more.
Right. Right. That was what I was reaching for too, that we need to be more vulnerable with each other. And that's what you did. I think that we need to be more vulnerable with each other as parents, and also with our kids too. Because I think when we're tempted not to let our guard down, because we want to be the authority figure, I'm going to tell you what to do because I'm your dad, I'm your mom, and I'm the power here, and you're going to listen to what I say. But you came down and looked at her in the eyes and communicated with her and treated her like she had value, right? That's really powerful.
Yeah. And I think it's just always, it's that thing of, if we can have, I think we can have higher expectations of our children than we do a lot of the time. And it's hard because, the kids are crying and it's loud, and oftentimes we just want them to stop crying. But and I don't currently have teenagers, but I remember being one, and the crying doesn't necessarily stop as we get older. Right. That sometimes we just get into, I think, the rut of managing, and not that it's bad. Like, sometimes you just need the crying to stop so they go to sleep. But I know for myself, I can just get into that rut of just constantly trying to manage my kids instead of parenting. And so I just love what you're doing with Media Savvy Mamas. And like you said, just providing a space for people to be able to be real and talk to each other and provide resources. But in a way that's saying, like, hey, parenting is hard. Having these conversations is hard. There's no perfect plan. And yeah, it's a complicated digital world that we're trying to raise kids in right now. And we all need all the support we can get.
Yeah. Authenticity is a big one. right? That's another aspect of what you did, another layer. You were being authentic. You really did have a story to tell. You didn't just say, oh, I've struggled too, just to get her to be quiet. You took a moment and then you said something real, right? You didn't say, now I'm going to tell you a story about a duck, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So authenticity is real. And going back to Media Savvy Mamas, I'm really trying to figure out a way to collect real stories from real moms to help us to navigate these problems we're going through. And then going back to your question about social media, too, I think authenticity and, the perfect parenting, the Instagram parenting, authenticity is a big one, right? We need to be authentic. And when we are teaching our kids about social media, we need to teach them how to navigate and to see beyond the bubble of social media and teach them, that's not all there is to the story, right? It was really cool. We had a church leader talk about that on social media, and he had an Instagram picture that was the little picture of the perfectly baked bread, and then he had a zoom out with the rest of the photo, and the kitchen was total disaster area. And of course, the whole congregation just busted up laughing because we know, right? Actually, last night, I had a teaching moment, where I had a very, very long day. It's the first week of school. We are all getting in our groove with a different thing every night. You know how this goes. We're getting up earlier. We have an elementary school kid and a middle school kid. So we're 2 hours staggered from each other. We get up at 6. We put someone on the bus at 7. We put someone on the bus at 9. We get home at 2. Then we get home at 4. Then we have scouts and music lessons and soccer practice and taekwondo, right? This is my week. And last night, we could not find soccer practice. We spent an hour driving to the wrong location, and then you get the idea. So at the end of the night, we got home. It was 8:30 at night. Nobody had had dinner. I put a frozen pizza in the oven. I overcooked it. And so I was scrambling to try and get it out, and it flipped over upside down. Oh yeah, into the bottom of the oven. So there is cheese, there are toppings everywhere. I mean, it was a slimy, melty, and of course my 2 boys are busting up. I mean, it was epic. So it's sizzling. And so of course they want to take pictures, and I'm like, I'm so going to Instagram this. And they're like, you are? I'm like, oh yeah, this is life. This is real life. And so I did. And they got all in on it, and they were making faces, disgusting. And I was exhausted at the end of the day, no makeup. And I was like, go ahead, take a picture of me with pizza, because I want to teach them, we post the nastiness too. And I have made a big effort to not touch up my photos and not filter my photos, and to be okay with posting with no makeup, because I want to practice what I preach. And so my moms can look at my social media and see me. And I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I have some pigmentation issues in my face. And it's hard for me to post pictures sometimes, because you can see it looks like scarring on my face. And I post the pictures anyway. And my kids know that, and they see my pictures on social media. And I think that as we moms do stand up and are examples to our kids and model that kind of behavior to our kids and teach them to be that way, that is even more powerful than what we say. because if they learn not to only post the happy fun times and the perfect times, and it's okay to post our melted, disgusting, awful pizza at the end of a long day with no makeup, then they learn, you know?
Absolutely. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's so true. It's being vulnerable is the biggest thing. Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for doing this. This has been fantastic.